Here are some of the most expensive abandoned cars in the world. Number 9. Ferrari Enzo. We start off this countdown with the Ferrari Enzo. This is one of the most sought-after Ferraris of all time, and easily one of the best Ferraris ever produced. This car was named after the founder of Ferrari, Enzo Ferrari. There were only 400 Enzos built, so you can probably imagine how expensive this car is. The Enzo retailed for just slightly over 650 grand when it came out, and anyone that bought one were smart to do it. That's because the Enzo now go for at least $2 million. This particular Enzo was found abandoned in Dubai. So why would someone leave a car worth over $2 million in Dubai? In case you guys didn't know, Dubai has some strict laws. Non-payment of debt is a criminal offense. The UAE has no bankruptcy laws, so there is no protection for people who don't pay their debts. Apparently, there have been thousands of cars abandoned each year in Dubai. They're simply left by the owners to gather dust. And unless the cars pose a hazard, years go by before police actually go around impounding the cars. The owner of this Enzo was apparently a British expat. He abandoned the car after defaulting on the payments. Obviously, things weren't going too well for him, so he left his entire Dubai life behind to avoid going to jail. The prisons in the UAE have a reputation of being notoriously tough, so that's why it makes sense that someone would leave an Enzo behind. Number 8. Porsche 911. Porsche has been making amazing sports cars for a long time. That makes sense because they're an old automobile company and their legacy stretches way back. And that brings us to the legendary 911. The 911 has been out since 1963. Its original design even used to slightly resemble the Mercedes 300 SL, a car we'll be talking about just a bit later. From the back, this 911 especially looks like the Mercedes 300 SL. However, this particular 911 was one of the world's oldest surviving 911s. It's gone from decaying in a decrepit barn to being restored to a classic in a museum. When it was found, even in its condition, Porsche wanted it for their museum. They ended up paying over $126,000 just because it was one of the first 911s ever manufactured. The car was able to get most of its parts from a donor vehicle. Porsche was able to give this 911 a legendary makeover. In case you want to witness this classic, you can go to the Porsche Museum in Stuttgart, Germany to have a look for yourself. Number 7. Lamborghini Miura. Lamborghini is easily one of the most recognized exotic brands out there. The company was founded back in 1963. Since then, Lamborghini has released arguably some of the best sports cars in the world. One of their first legendary cars was the Lamborghini Miura. This car was one of the most iconic, not to mention valuable Lamborghinis to ever be created. When it was released, it was the fastest production road car in the world. Back in the day, this car was extremely popular with rock stars, celebrities, and anyone that was rich enough to buy it. Nowadays, a well-maintained Miura can easily go for over $1 million. This particular Miura was a second production Miura S. It was found in a barn in New Jersey where it sat for decades. Only 17 of this edition Miuras were made total. The owner had it since 1971 and everything on it was original. It's so original, it even had the original tires. The funny thing is, in the tape player, there was still a Rolling Stones cassette. It's as if the owner drove it into the garage playing the Rolling Stones, shut off the music in the car, and just said, okay, that's it, no more. Number 6. Audi R8. How does an R8 get left? Well, for this particular car, there's a very specific, interesting reason. It was owned by famous cricket player Virat Kohli. He's actually a brand ambassador for Audi, so this car was probably given to him for free. Maybe because he got it for free, that's why it somehow ended up with a guy in an illegal call center scam. So the guy running the scam was eventually arrested, and when he was arrested, the R8 was seized by the police as well. And we all know that the police aren't in the business of taking care of cars. So it was seized and kept at the station. And the R8 just sat outside the station with no one taking care of it. But why not just at least keep the car in a garage? Wouldn't that have made sense? Number 5. BMW M1. The BMW M1 was an iconic BMW known for its exotic look despite being a BMW. This car not only looked ahead of its time, but it was also extremely fast and powerful. The BMW M1 is one of the most elite cars in BMW's prestigious M department. Only 453 M1s were built between 1978 and 1981. This particular M1 had been modified for a high-speed record run. Race car driver Harold Ertl purchased the car and worked with oil company BP to give the car a radical transformation. Ertl had the car fitted with twin turbochargers, giving this BMW just over 400 horsepower. In 1981, Ertl set a new world land speed record of 187.3 miles per hour in this M1. But after the car was sold in 1993, the car just sat untouched for years until it was rediscovered in 2019. And this wasn't the only M1 left to rot in a garage. This red M1 was abandoned in a southern Italian garage, and it's been sitting for even longer. It's been left untouched since 1982. It's even still had the original tires manufactured in 1980 with only 4,593 miles on the odometer. In case you're wondering, pristine M1s easily go for over $500,000. Buying a few of these can easily make a dent in anyone's bank account. This reminds us of athletes who end up going broke. And no, it's not just because they bought a few expensive cars. Find out why by watching this video on the top reasons why athletes go broke. Number 4. Ferrari Daytona. This Ferrari Daytona is pretty much like a ghost. It wasn't even known to actually exist to many Ferrari enthusiasts. That's because for over 40 years, this one-off Ferrari was nowhere to be found. And since it was the only one of its kind, no one remembered that it actually existed. It was just discovered gathering dust in a Japanese barn. Ferrari only ever commissioned one street version of its Daytona with a full aluminum body, the key Extinction. This car wasn't well preserved at all, and it definitely was in barn condition. Whatever happened with this Ferrari? It was exported to a Japanese dealership in 1971. It was actually featured in the January 1972 issue of Car Graphic, a Japanese car magazine. After passing hands several times, it ended up in the barn of its last owner, Makoto Taiki, sometime around 1980. And that's where this Ferrari sat for several decades until it was rediscovered. Amazingly, in its unrestored condition, this Daytona ended up selling for a whopping $2 million. Number 3. Field of Ferraris. Just how in the world were there just a bunch of Ferraris parked in an open field? These Ferraris were discovered rusting away in a field in Houston, Texas. The cars belonged to a prominent attorney in the area. Obviously, making plenty of money wasn't a problem to him because he had this collection of 13 Ferraris along with a couple of Rolls Royces. Unfortunately, the owner was diagnosed with multiple health issues, so that meant that he wasn't able to take care of his cars. He had a friend move his Ferraris into a warehouse, but for some reason, the payments for storing the cars at the warehouse were missed. So these Ferraris were moved outside once that happened. But the payments resumed and the back rent was also taken care of. The cars were never moved back into the warehouse. These Ferraris were just found earlier this year in 2019, back around the beginning of summer, so the fate of these Ferraris are still being worked out. Number 2. Lamborghini Countach. The Lamborghini Countach was arguably one of the fastest and most powerful supercars back in the 1980s. The production of the Countach started in 1981 and ended in 1990. There aren't any objections over the fact that the Lamborghini Countach is an exotic car that people would pay a lot of money to buy even today. And that's why it's so strange that a random Reddit user reported the existence of this Countach in his grandmother's garage. Apparently, this person's grandpa used to have an exotic car rental business, but the rising insurance costs forced him to shut down the business. He sold off most of the cars in his business, but there were some cars he kept, such as this Countach. Once the grandfather passed on, the grandmother never got rid of the Lambo or the Ferrari 308 that was found. A pristine Countach could easily go for $400,000 to $500,000, but obviously, this car had a lot of restoration that it needed. Number 1. Mercedes 300 SL. The Mercedes 300 SL was one of the most loved luxury cars way back in 1954. The design, the interior, the exterior, and the build quality were ahead of its time. When this car first came out, the MSRP was just under $7,000 in the US, and because of the rarity and its legacy, the 300 SL can easily go for a whopping $2.5 million in auction. And that's why whoever left behind this particular car, they're probably kicking themselves right now. This rare beauty of a car was found lifeless in a garage in Jacksonville, Florida. Although the car was rusted on the outside and the interior was all torn apart, this Mercedes still does represent the golden era of the automobile industry to enthusiasts. The car was parked and left back in 1965. However, this abandoned 300 SL has been repatriated to Germany to live out the rest of its days in a museum. Interestingly enough, the museum won't be restoring the Mercedes. They want to keep the history behind the patinas on the car. Watch this next video to find out the exact reasons why athletes go broke.